The Thursday, November 14th, 2019 meeting of the Royal Oak Zoning Board of Appeals. The board does not write the zoning ordinance, but does have the authority to grant relief from it where practical difficulty or unnecessary hardship would result. The board will vote on each agenda item following the public hearing. Use variance requests require a minimum of 6 affirmative votes in order to grant the requested variances. Non-use variance requests require a minimum of 5 affirmative votes in order to grant the variances. If you would like to request that the board table or adjourn your case due to the absence of a full board, you must inform the chairperson immediately after the public hearing. Petitioners shall do their best to limit their presentations to 10 minutes. Each participant in a public hearing shall do their best to limit their comments to 3 minutes. And as it sits right now, we are down 1 board member, but I have a feeling that is going to change. I think we will have a full board pretty soon here. So with that being said, that moves us along to the approval of the minutes for the October 10th, 2019 meeting.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion.
Support.
And we have a second. Any comments, questions, additions, deletions? Not seeing any, I will call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes. Moves us right along to, well, before I move on to our first item of old business, if anybody is here for case number D2, which is the case at 112 North Alexander, that has been withdrawn. The city worked something out with the petitioner, and we will no longer be hearing that case. So if you are here for that case, we will not be hearing it. And that being said, I will move back to item C1, which is case number 190933, public hearing on the appeal of Mike Daubenmire, Fortune Wireless petitioner and AT&T owner for the following variances. And since they're a little bit different than what we have here, I'll just hand the ball over to you, sir.
Sure. The Planning Commission approved the special land use for the tower at this location at their September meeting. They postponed approval of the site plan at the September meeting as well as at the October meeting. The petitioner had modified the drawings, the location of the proposed tower, and some of the screening and landscaping items associated with it based on the comments that were provided at the October Planning Commission meeting. They were back at the Planning Commission meeting 2 nights ago with those modifications that were requested, and the Planning Commission did grant them site plan approval contingent upon receiving the necessary variances. Because they moved the location of the tower, and I'll reference the image on the screen in front of you, they did modify the location of the tower. The blue dot illustrates the original proposal, and the red dot, based on the drawing provided by the petitioner, the red dot illustrates the location of where they were asked by the Planning Commission to cite it at, and that is what the Planning Commission did approve. You'll see some notes on that aerial photograph that shows that originally, the original location, as illustrated by the blue dot, was 56 feet 1 inch from the nearest public right-of-way to the north, which is 4th Street. The petitioner had cited the tower 29 feet to the south as reflected on the red dot, and that has pulled it back further from the nearest right-of-way. It's now 85 feet 1 inches from the nearest public right-of-way. They also, in moving the location, they also modify the distance from the nearest property that's zoned 1 family residential. Again, the blue dot is the original proposed location. The red dot is the approved location. The red dot illustrates the center of the tower and the fact that it is 213.83 feet from the nearest property zone 1 family residential. As you can see on that aerial photograph, it's pointing to a surface parking lot, and I'll illustrate the zoning map. The cell tower is approximately in this location on the subject property, and that arrow is pointing to this particular property, which is zone 1 family residential. But as you can see, it is the surface parking lot that's utilized by the VFW hall. And the nearest structure, which is actually zone multiple family and is a 5-unit rental building, is greater than 250 feet away. With that said, the petitioner is seeking modified variance requests. Again, the zoning ordinance requires a distance from the nearest right-of-way line and from the nearest residentially zoned property of equal to the tower's height. Tower is approved at 250 feet tall, therefore it needs to be 250 feet distance from both of those items. We listed the variance request as open-ended because we weren't certain exactly where the Planning Commission was going to approve it. Now we know exactly where the Planning Commission approved it, as I illustrated. So the variance requests that they're seeking are to waive 164.9 feet from the nearest public right-of-way. Again, the minimum distance was 250 feet, but they're proposing, the approved location is 85.1 feet from that property line. And they are seeking a variance request of 36.0 feet from the minimum required 250 feet from the nearest residential zone property. With that said, I can answer any questions that you might have.
All right, any questions for Mr. Murphy at this point?
I will
Yes,
note
sir.
that this, since one of the variants, compared to the original request that you had received in September, one of the variance requests is now greater, and one of the variance requests is less. So we noticed this as a brand-new public hearing. Therefore, we notified all the property owners within 300 feet, and we published it in the paper, and there is a required public hearing at tonight's meeting.
Yes, sir.
Just a quick point of clarification or question, Mr. Murphy. So you're saying the variance is 250 feet because it's the height of tower, so therefore if the height of the tower was 100 feet, then it would only have to work within that, so some of these variances wouldn't even be here.
Correct. The distance from the nearest residential property would be, that variance request would be eliminated.
Okay, and the height, and the reason why there is those variances is it because the possibility in the past when they created these variances is if the tower falls sideways versus the newer constructions now, that now goes straight down.
Oh, you mean the ordinance provision?
Yeah.
It's a older ordinance provision, and yes, you're correct that in most instances, the logic behind that is due to the collapse distance. Structurally, most towers of this nature are designed to collapse amongst a very small radius, and petitioner had talked about that 2 months ago, and how this particular tower is designed to accomplish that as well. So that's in large part the logic behind, not all of it, but it's a large part the logic behind the equivalency in height.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Murphy?
Well, maybe one quick
Yes,
one.
ma'am.
So what is the height of the current tower that we have?
I believe that the petitioner can give you a more precise number than or it's in the report, but to my understanding,
can't
it's the same.
Oh, okay, 250, or, okay.
All right, not seeing anybody else, is the petitioner present?
My name is Brian Monahan. I represent Ameritech. Ameritech, that shows you how long I've been doing this. AT&T Mobility. Let me first say, yeah, it is 250 feet, the existing tower. With me today is Brad Riggs, who's the Director of Site Acquisition for Fortune Wireless. They're the folks that AT&T Mobility hires to put sites like this together. In addition, Patricia Coates is here today. She's the administrator for Clemis, which is the organization in Oakland County that takes care of all of the technology and wireless communication needs for 911, and then assist all of the local police departments and fire departments by providing the equipment and the access to that radio system that they need for not only 911, but their various dispatch. So that's a very big part of this request for these variances, because the reason the tower has to be 250 feet tall is because that's what Clemis requires. They're on the existing tower and they'll be on the new tower. That's an important factor here because they have to connect fiber from that tower to the new police department once the police department has moved to the new building. And so part of the siting for Clemis and for Ameritech, I mean, we need to be as close to the downtown area in Royal Oak as we can, but so does Clemis. And then, in addition to that, Clemens needs to be as close as possible to the police department. And so when you look around that general area, and we worked with the city when this first, the issue first came up of moving the tower, when you look around in the city area, there are very few locations in the city that would accommodate just the base requirements for the tower. The actual area that will be enclosed for the tower is 40 by 50. And so that really eliminates a lot of potential locations right there. But I will tell you, and this is important with respect to the potential hardship and the practical difficulty issue that I'd like to address in a minute, there is not a single parcel of property in the downtown area where Clemens and AT&T need to be located that would accommodate a 250-foot setback. I would like to also address real quick, I'm trying not to repeat a lot of things because I know you've already had a full presentation a few months ago, but I did want to touch on what, is it Mr. Ofak? Ofak.
Sir,
had
before you
mentioned.
go on, can I ask you just to move a little more toward the
I'm
microphone
sorry.
so the people at home can pick you up? Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, I've never been accused of being not loud enough, but I will certainly move over. And I've got copies, but in our original, and I'd be happy to pass those out, but in our original submittals to the township, we provided a letter from a registered Michigan structural engineer, which details the manner in which this tower would collapse in the very unlikely event that it did collapse, that there was a structural failure. The tower is actually constructed at, I think it's 125% of all applicable wind and icing loading that is required under both state and federal and local ordinances. But in addition, it's designed to literally fold in on itself. And as the letter indicates, it actually would result in a 20-foot radius of a potential fall zone from the base of the tower. If you'd like, I do have copies of that letter, and I'd be happy to pass those out. I think that's a very big factor here as well, because clearly, with a 250-foot tower, the 250-foot requirement is relating to a vertical, or rather, I guess, a horizontal failure. And it's presupposing that the tower will fall over as its complete length. And since that's not how this tower would fail, I think that really does mitigate the issue with respect to why, a variance is plausible here. Anyway, what I'd also like to do is specifically address the various issues as it relates to the granting of the variance. And looking at the zoning ordinance, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, the primary standard that AT&T Mobility needs to meet to show for a non-use variance is that a practical difficulty will result if the setback requirements are strictly applied. That is certainly what will happen here, and not just for AT&T, but more particularly also to Clemens, and then as it relates in a corollary fashion to both the Royal Oak Police Department and the Royal Oak Fire Department. They need 250 feet in order to continue to maintain the technical and the informational systems that they have in place that relate to 911 and then the various local dispatching. In addition to showing that practical difficulty, there are then the additional 4 requirements for a non-use variance. First, will the lack of a variance unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted use? Yes, AT&T actually owns that parcel. There's an existing AT&T building. They're not AT&T Mobility. The AT&T company that owns the building is more with the landlines. Not too many people use their landline anymore, but the company's still there. Its towers are permitted use there because the special use has already been approved by the Planning Commission. Second, will a variance do substantial justice to the applicant, AT&T Mobility, as well as to other property owners in the district? Again, the answer is yes. Obviously, it will do substantial justice to AT&T Mobility because it will allow us to continue to provide wireless communication services in the downtown, greater downtown Royal Oak area. In addition, given the importance of the tower to Clemmis, I think it can be argued it's going to do substantial justice to everybody in the area and those traveling through it, because it will help to maintain the 911 system and the various dispatch requirements of both the police and the fire department for Royal Oak. Third is the need for the variance due to the unique circumstances of the property. Again, I think the answer is yes. The unique circumstance of the property is twofold. First, there is sufficient area on the parcel to allow for the 40 by 50 foot parcel that's required for the base of the tower. In that 40 to 50 foot area, obviously there's the tower, but there's also a generator. There's also the equipment shelter that needs to be placed. But it's also sufficiently close to the police department that the fiber that needs to be run by Clemmis can be run from the tower to the police department. So it's a very unique parcel of property in that regard. Finally, is the hardship that's been created by someone with an interest in the property? And again, I think the answer is well, I guess it's no in this circumstance. AT&T Mobility, perfectly happy to remain sitting on the tower that's right, I guess it's right over here. But obviously due to the plans of the city to redo this entire area, which I just looked at the other day, beautiful, by the way, the park that will be here, we have to move the tower. It's not anything that AT&T Mobility, it's not a decision AT&T Mobility made. It's a decision that the city of Royal Oak did. So with that said, I think we certainly comply with the ordinance requirements for non-use variance. I think given that Clemmis and, again, the corollary of the police department and the fire department being able to continue to utilize the tower makes it a true win-win situation. We would ask that the board grant the requested variances. If there's any questions, I'd be certainly happy to address those or have Mr. Riggs or perhaps Ms. Coates address them.
Mr. Kroll?
You talked about the radius in which the tower would fall.
Yes,
Do
sir.
we have any exceptions to that rule?
I can't think of any. I would tell you that I suppose if there was a hurricane or a tornado of sufficient strength that was able to uproot the entire tower, that would, I mean, all bets would be off. If you had a tornado of that strength, I think our tower would be the least of the city's concerns. It is designed for in excess of 125% of all applicable wind loading and ice loading. The structural letter that we have provided is pretty clear that in the event of a collapse, it will actually fold down on itself.
Mr. Clamp?
So I guess just to verify, what is the radius again that it would fall in? Is it
20.
20 feet? Okay.
The letter, and again, I'd be happy to provide you a copy of it. It's an actual 20-foot radius from the base of the tower.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
So Birmingham and Pontiac and Southfield and Troy, they all have towers that do the same thing for.
I don't know if each community has their own tower. I know that, I think there's 36 in.
Right now, there are 54.
54? And they're all 250 feet?
No.
Okay. But there are 54 of these towers throughout Oakland County, and Clemmis is responsible for providing the, not only the countywide 911 access, but all of the dispatch technology that's required for all of the local police and fire departments.
Well, it's been stressed that you have to be downtown. But Birmingham's is a mile away from downtown? Is that correct? And Pontiac's is a half a mile away from downtown? And so I guess I was hoping you'd come back and give different locations that you looked at and say, these won't work because. But I'm only hearing about this one location, that nothing else was considered.
We have actually looked at a number of locations. The one in Pontiac is on Oakland Avenue, just north of Wide Track. I don't know where their downtown delineates. The one in Birmingham is on the golf course. There is also a supplemental tower on the roof of the police department right downtown. The one in Novi is 400 feet tall. The one in Southfield is 350. So they're all over the place.
Then, that being said, have you ever looked into any of those types of, maybe a shorter tower in our downtown, complementing with a taller tower someplace where it's fits into the requirements?
We are in the midst of changing out the radio system. Right now, we have a Harris system that is reaching its end of life for all of our public safety. We put that in when we put in the tower that is over there. We are replacing that with a new Motorola system that will, it's up to the vendor to meet certain requirements, to guarantee certain coverage levels. And Oakland County is so diverse. You know, the north end has very hilly terrain, a lot of trees. The south end is flatter but has a lot of buildings. So we have a couple of different requirements. We have higher requirements than almost any public safety system in the country, certainly in Michigan. As far as radio coverage from a patrol car or a fire truck, a mobile radio with an external antenna on the vehicle is very easy to achieve coverage. It's the portable radios on the hip that the officers and firefighters are carrying around with them that's a little more difficult. And it is especially difficult when you go into a building because you lose some decibels of coverage depending upon the type of structure of that building.
So some of these towns aren't as,
Some of these towns,
don't have as good a
it's
connection
residential, you know, or it's a little tiny store. You have some incredible buildings here in downtown, which is why the vendors want to make their guarantee to have it right downtown. Because the closer you are to the tower, the better the coverage. Royal Oak is very unique in the type of structures you have down here, in the density of them. It needs to be downtown for Motorola to be able to guarantee that coverage. Right now, Royal Oak exceeds the minimum that Harris guaranteed because the tower is right here. Other areas receive what is considered the minimum standard for coverage, which is pretty much coverage inside a single-story wood frame structure. That's the countywide standard. You don't have those here. You have huge
could you
buildings.
just give me one other example where you considered in this area?
We looked at, there's a tower in Royal Oak Township that's tall. Many of the towers around here are very short. They don't provide the coverage we need. There's one in Royal Oak Township off about 8.5 mile in Wyoming. We did look at that one because it's tall enough. Unfortunately, it's also going to make Royal Oak have only the minimum standard of coverage because it's too far away. So again, back to 97% of single-story wood frame structures, which is not what your public safety needs in this downtown area.
Thank you.
Mr. Kroll.
Can you tell me the cost of fiber optics from the new police station to that antenna?
I cannot. We have,
Can you
It's-
ballpark it?
it's out for bid right now, so we have a couple of proposals.
Is there a range?
I don't have that with me. It is also, we're asking for dual entry into it so that there's a backup. So that extends the cost considerably.
That seems like that would have an impact
On,
I mean, I've heard a lot of dollars, but that dollar amount never gets told, so.
I can look up the bids we've had so far, but since it hasn't been awarded, we don't really make that public until it has been awarded.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess just to piggyback on that, the farther away it is, does it cost more money? It's the,
Sure.
okay.
Yes.
And then my other question was, what's the life of this tower? Like, when will it become obsolete or?
I would tell you this, the lease is for at least 35 years. I know that most of them are designed for at least 75 years worth of life, but as to this one specifically, I don't have that information.
Some of our county towers were built in 1994, so
Just
They
as
have-
Royal Oak grows and gets bigger and we have taller buildings or whatever, that was, okay.
Mr. Ofack.
I have a feeling someone from the audience will bring up the same point that they brought up last time, and I was wondering if you could speak to it. Why would the location over here by the new city hall and new police department, was that not acceptable?
That was not proposed to us as a site. The existing tower is fine if you leave that there and,
I will tell you that I know we worked with the police chief in locating a location. So I would have thought that if that's something they wanted, he would have mentioned it.
Yes, sir.
Kind of on the discussion of that Leslie was bringing up, I seem to recall a couple months ago when you were here, you talked about the two variables you can control with these towers are the power and the height. Can you like review that again? I think it had something to do with being so near the Canadian border as well.
right. Radio coverage, the physics of it, the type of coverage you get is dependent upon location of the tower or the transmitter, the power you can achieve, and the height of the tower. We cannot control the power. That is limited by the Federal Communications Commission, and because of our proximity to Canada and an international treaty, we're very limited on how high how much power we can put out. So that part we can't control. All we can control is height and location.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, if your team doesn't have anything else, I will ask you folks to take a seat so I can go ahead and open up the public hearing. Thank you both very much. All right, now is the time to address the zoning board on this issue. Anybody who wants to address this has 3 minutes. Who would like to go first? Mr. Razor?
Thank you, Chairman Jim Razor, 201 East 4th. I feel a little bit at a disadvantage because I've only got 3 minutes, so I want to move quickly. First of all, I've got an aid. There's a copy for all of you. I don't want you to read it, but there's a couple of things I want to show you. Second of all, I want to show you a 20-page list of all the towers that have collapsed, along with another 20-page list of all the litigation from all the towers that have collapsed. So them saying that this tower doesn't have a likelihood of getting way too icy and collapsing is ridiculous. And I want to tell you that this particular tower, could I have one of those back? I'm so sorry. No, not of that one. I gave you enough for all of them, and I didn't keep one for this side. So as you know, I own the property at 201 East 4th. It's a 1924 building. I put pretty much my entire life into it. It's really cool. It's the headquarters for my law firm. On page 3 of this, you'll see that my commercial broker says that this tower is going to cost me and my company about $250,000 into valuing my property. Because these things are like kryptonite for your property values in about a 4-block radius. And the fact, Commissioner Anderson, that you, or zoning board member Anderson, were able to ask them and not get an answer, where else could it go? Could you put a smaller antenna here and have it out in a golf course? Could you put it down by the freeway on the tower that is already there at 696 and I-75? Could you put it down by Detroit Edison? Can you put it on top of the 5th? Because keep in mind, this thing is taller than the 5th. You didn't get an answer to that because they didn't do that due diligence, and they didn't bid it. They didn't let anybody else in the downtown bid whether they wanted to have this tower. This is a $300,000 tower that brings in $170,000 a year. And I want to show you on page 6 of what I handed to you, the scale of how far this is out of the scale of our downtown. There's a pedestrian at the bottom of that. This is only a 107-foot tower. The one they're suggesting is 20 stories tall. My building is 125 feet away. I showed you a list of all the times these have collapsed and taken out other buildings. And the fact is that you have no guarantee that this thing isn't going to get all loaded up with ice and collapse and cause personal injury. But also I want to point out that because it is close enough, your ordinance requires that it be residential zoned property, that it has to be within a certain limit of. Not R1, residential zoned property. All of the central business district is residential zone property as a permitted use. Ergo, the property it's on is residentially zoned. The property next door is residentially zoned. My property is residentially zoned. Let me read what the zoning ordinance says about the central business district. This zone is designed to provide for a variety of office, business, service, entertainment, and retail uses which occupy the prime retail frontage, by serving the comparison, convenience, and service needs of the market area, which includes the city. It's designed to promote convenient pedestrian shopping and the stability of a retail environment by encouraging a contiguous retail frontage and prohibiting automobile-related uses, and also allowing for residential on the second floor. So the very parameters that you're looking at, which is a distance from R1, is false. It's a distance from any residential. It's on property that supports
Mr.
residential.
Razor, I do need to wrap up, please.
Hey, I'm sorry, AT&T got 10 minutes, and I know the rules by which we.
I've already given you extra time, so
I know that you have. Let me go through the factors just really quick, Chair, and I'll sit down.
thank you.
Let's go through the factors. They can use the property for a permitted purpose. They're already using the property for a permitted purpose. There's no hardship here from the petitioner. The petitioner is AT&T, not even the landowner. The hardship is the city and the county. The city and the county are not the petitioners. Ergo, there's no hardship by the petitioner, which is required for you to make a finding for a zoning variance. You cannot consider their leasees having a hardship as a hardship for the purposes of these factors. And I understand that the city might have a hardship because we want to build a park, which I championed, and that the county might have a hardship because they want E911
All right,
service, and
Mr.
that's
Razor,
great.
that's 2 extra minutes. We're done here.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And again, Chair, I would have liked as much time as they had. Thank you very much.
But you've sat on this board. You know the procedure.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
My name is Neil Pluff. I live at 723 Magnolia. I'm a 24-year resident of Royal Oak and a retired engineer. I'd like to speak to the necessity for a 250-foot tower downtown. Ms. Anderson and Mr. Razor have already covered some of my points, so I'll try to be brief. The interests of the city and the county are the same as far as emergency communications, but they differ when it comes to the downtown streetscape. The interests of AT&T and the county are the same as far as a convenient new location for the communications that they offer. However, it's not clear to me at all that the county has done its due diligence for looking at alternate sites. It's been suggested, and I'll repeat them here, that an antenna could be mounted at about 220 feet above ground on the 5th apartment building on South Washington. It could be mounted on the 350-foot MDOT tower about 1.7 miles from here at the intersection of I-696 and 75. Or another possibility would be to allow the county to build a new tower at the DPS yard on Campbell Road, which is certainly not in a residential area. And that's about 1.4 miles from here. So I will ask the board tonight not to approve the height of 250 feet unless the county can show that they've done their due diligence, that alternate sites are not acceptable by their own technical criteria for area coverage and capacity, and that not locating the antenna down here would provide a hardship to the county. And I thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, and anybody else? All right, not seeing anybody, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table. And if your team wants to come back up to the microphone in case we have any questions for you. I mean, if you'd like to address it, we've heard a little bit of discussion from some of the audience about a lack of due diligence. Would you like to speak to that at all?
As I'm sure many of the board members remember, Oakland County looked at a number of existing sites back when the original tower that is outside the police department was built. We looked at coverage from every possible existing tower, including the MDOT tower. Just because a tower is a certain height does not mean that we can put equipment at that height. There are already incumbent folks on the tower at the peak and at the best heights. So we have been trying to talk to MDOT to see what we could get if we end up over there. Again, that would put your best coverage at about 10 Mile and Campbell in a residential area and not in the downtown. But right now, MDOT's got a lot of other folks already on that tower, so we would not get the top of it.
Mr. Kroll.
What is your contingency plan if we turn you down tonight?
That's a good question. I would very much hope that the city leaves the existing tower in place. That would meet the city's needs, the county's needs, and AT&T's needs, and do some sort of landscaping around it. That would be, I think, the best plan if that were to occur. Otherwise, we would have to talk to our new vendor, Motorola, and again, see what we could get at certain heights, look at the one in Royal Oak Township, look at the one at MDOT, and see if they can still guarantee their coverage. If they cannot, we would have to amend our contract to reduce that coverage. Keep in mind, the coverage is in terms of percentage for the entire county, all 960 miles. So the in-street portable coverage is 97%. That means about 28 miles of the county, they don't guarantee that coverage. We would like the parts they don't guarantee to be in the farmland in the northern part of the county and not in downtown Royal Oak. But if they did have to move the tower and the coverage was not what we would like in Royal Oak, they could probably still meet their contractual requirements.
I think what I heard, a portion of that was that they'd have to amend their contract with the city of Royal Oak because they wouldn't be able to provide the kind of coverage that they're now contractually obligated to do.
Have we looked at the top of the fifth?
We looked at a number of buildings.
The fifth, I mean, in particular the
Yes. There are some issues with putting things on building tops. Structurally, there's also some shadowing that occurs because of the building itself that interferes with some radio coverage. There are issues with trying to get 7x24 power backup and generators and things up there. So we've looked at a number of buildings here. We did that also 10 years ago when we built this tower.
Did I see your hand, Mr. Klatt?
No.
Oh, okay. Mr. Olfak.
I'm gonna put out a motion to accept the variances as requested.
We have a motion on the table.
Second.
We have a second. Mr. Olfak?
Hearing their discussion, as well as remembering back to when the city was first looking at the tower that's currently back here, and remembering all those discussions and all the concerns that citizens had, and that being right there, easily seen within the, well, not the central parking and park area, but right there by the library. And this being basically still 1 block away from Mr. Razor's law firm, so it's switching over now to across from his law firm, but still 1 block away. Similar setup where it's in the crotch of 2 buildings, as it is here, and seeing that there was no other residents in that area that would be within the supposed fall zone if it went sideways, nor any other building owners. It's, to me, seeing that the hardships that are presented are outweighed by the safety that is needed and the other concerns that have been brought up. So I'm comfortable with granting the variances as requested. I don't see any other spot that they could go at that they've looked at already. And with this being a tower that can come straight down, putting it on top of a building, I would think that would cause a lot of damage to whatever building it's put on versus putting it in a lot where it could come down and do minor damage. So for that, I have no problem with what they're requesting.
Mr. Gavin?
I think Mr. Ofak summarized my thoughts pretty well too, and the one additional thing that has occurred to me is in being in the angle between those two buildings and with prevailing wind conditions, if that thing, in the very unlikely event that it were to go sideways, it would hit those buildings first and not be likely to go across the road or hit a residence. So I think given the totality of all the everything we've heard, I think that's probably the best spot.
Any other comments? Mr. Kroll?
I'm really struggling with this. I don't feel as though any of the hardships you pointed out were hardships that I would accept in normal terms of zoning governance. There's nothing special about the property. Certainly is in your best interest, but I don't know about those surrounding you. From what I hear, that might not be true. I am concerned about the thing falling down. I don't think there seems to be more than exceptions that I thought there were. The lack of cost of how much this is going to be to go from point A to point B with fiber optics, which is not inexpensive, is not presented to us. The other side is, I sat on this table 10 years ago when we decided that, and it was not an easy decision, and I think we went through it for a few months until we finally, and what we finally came down to was the safety of our police and firemen, basically, and that's, if there's anything moving me to vote to approve this, it's that. I do not think the due diligence has been very good. I think there are some opportunities to put that thing somewhere other than our downtown. We tend to make decisions for whatever reason, and no matter how long we take to make it, and then all of a sudden, for our lifetime, we've got this 250-foot antenna, and it's not by the police station, it's in the center of our downtown. I can appreciate Mr. Razor's thoughts that his building is going to depreciate because of it. I'm not a realtor, but it sounds logical, maybe yes, maybe no, but I would be concerned if I were him as well. So I don't know, I struggled with it 10 years ago, I'm struggling with it again.
Anybody else? Yes, sir. Well, Ms. Anderson, then Mr. Opak.
I'm struggling with it also, Alan, because I don't see the due diligence. When I asked, what areas did you seriously look to, I feel like it was just kind of we just kind of thought about it, but we brushed it off. I didn't see any statistics. I didn't see why it couldn't be there, and I just feel that there are other options. Knowing that this was going to happen all along, don't know why it wasn't already incorporated into the new police station location. So I guess for that reason, I'll probably be voting against it.
Anybody else?
I would think at the new police station, it's closer to residential lots, and that would concern me. I just see it's a block away from where it already is. I don't see, the landscaping that is being required, I think, is going to make the lot more attractive as you walk by, so for pedestrians. And I think the reason that the ordinance was enacted was probably because of a lateral fall. And if we don't have that much concern, I don't see why this should be a problem, putting it in this location.
Mr. Opak.
The other thing, in talking about moving it out of the downtown's going to constantly get built up. You probably want, and they'll probably say it too, the more you move it farther away, the newer the buildings that go up, the worse it gets for the fire and safety. So I would think no matter what, we'd still want it somewhere in downtown. And if they looked everywhere in downtown and this is the best spot to keep it at least farthest away from residential, I don't know what other thing can be done. I mean, people will bring up problems with how it was going to appear when this tower first went up. And I remember all those discussions. And ever since it's gone up, No, it just bleeds into the background. No one thinks about it. I mean, I don't know how many times I've ridden up here with my kids and don't even think about what the tower is or driven down downtown. So, yes, there's going to be heartburn until it goes up, and then after that, people are just going to, in your mind, just let it be free. It's going to be just like this tower. After a year, no one's going to even notice it in your mind.
I mean, I think there's a pretty compelling argument for this location. If you think about it, it's really pretty much smack dab between the two senior high-rises, very close to the Fifth, very close to the Skylofts and other higher developments that may come forward in the future. And the issue of being able to have radio communication inside those high-rises, I think, is of the most paramount concern, particularly in those senior high-rises. But even more importantly, you know, watching the Plan Commission, not 2 days ago, but 32 days ago, or whatever it was, I mean, I thought the Plan Commission, quite frankly, did a good job holding your guys' feet to the fire, and you came back with a much, much better product than I think we would have otherwise gotten. I'm not prepared to say that you haven't done your due diligence. I don't happen to agree with that assessment, and I know that you worked with the police chief, and, I mean, I don't think anybody loves the fact that this is gonna happen, but public safety is public safety, and I think, you know, above and beyond everything else, that's my major consideration. Yes, sir.
And I was thinking about the discussion on cost related to that fiber optic line. As I recall, the last time this was on our agenda, the police chief had sent a letter to this board stating something along the lines of the cost of construction was being covered by AT&T, which in the long run would save the city a lot of money, because otherwise we would have to construct this. So I know that not necessarily should be a factor in our decision, but I think that goes to that cost discussion.
My question with the fiber optics, which hasn't been discussed.
No,
That's probably a pretty
Yeah,
big
but
bill,
we're really
too.
just talking about setbacks, so.
Yeah.
Nobody, do you have something, Mr. Clapp?
No, my points have already been, all good comments and good points. Thank you.
All right, then I will call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
You got the 2 noes? Can I see the hands on the nays, please? You got that? Okay, great. All right, so motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, folks. All right, so that moves us right along. Let me get caught up on my computer here. To our first item of new business, which is item D1, case number 191140, public hearing on the appeal of Dennis Cowan petitioner and Ron Peludat, I hope I pronounced that correctly, owner for the following variances: waive 4 foot of the minimum required 4 foot west side yard setback, waive 167 square feet of the maximum allowable total lot coverage of 1,800 square feet to permit construction of a single-family dwelling with a detached garage on a vacant lot located, oh, it doesn't even have an address, parcel number 25214093031. Mr. Murphy.
I'm going to take some of you back to several years ago when there was a variance associated with this property when it was a larger parcel. If you look at the aerial photograph on screen in front of you, you'll see on Hudson at the intersection of Woodward Avenue, if you recall, there's a large 4-unit multiple family building. And the original size or configuration of this particular piece of property was, as I'm outlining here with the mouse, it was not only the obvious portion of the building with the parking lot behind it, but also the open grass area between it and the single-family home to the east. Variances were granted in order to allow the 4-unit multiple family building to stand on a smaller size piece of property, and the new property line is in this general area. We'll jump back to the survey and the report. This is the outline of the apartment complex. It currently has a parcel configuration along the alley to the parking lot behind it, and there's a small notch that makes its way towards West Hudson. The subject property, or the property in question today that's seeking the variance, is what's labeled B. And B has a frontage along West Hudson, adjacent to the sidewalk, has a frontage of only 32 feet. 64 feet back, it opens up to be wider at 49 feet. So again, the property is 49 feet to the rear, but the frontage along Hudson is 32 feet, so narrow at the front, widens open to the back. When the variances were granted for the multiple family dwelling, as you can see, there are, on the aerial photograph, there are numerous windows on this particular side of the structure adjacent to that vacant lot. In order to meet the building code requirements, the petitioner had to modify their property line to include this portion, a distance of 20 feet out from the building, that many openings on that side, the architects shake their head, that many openings or operable windows, based on a building code requirement, required a larger setback from the property line. But what they did do is they recorded, as you can see referenced, they recorded a permanent easement along this entire portion adjacent to the multifamily structure. Again, it's the multifamily structure's property, but they granted a permanent easement to the subject property, or property B. That permanent easement allows for driveways, landscaping, fences, things of that nature. It does not allow for structure, a new home built on B, to be within that easement, but it does allow for things like driveways. And the petitioner has been trying to market for sale parcel B, and because of its perplexing arrangement, configuration, they are coming to you today to seek some variances that they can then, we'll say, have in their back pocket as they go to developers and try and sell the property. So the developer has, if you do grant a variance, the developer has the assurance that they can do something on the property without themselves having to come for a variance in front of you. So the petitioner, the property owner, is seeking to achieve that so that it makes it, on their purpose, more marketable. In doing so, they've given you a sketch idea of what they may have in, a potential buyer may have in mind to want to construct. And that, I will illustrate, because the property is only 32 feet wide, again, at the frontage on Hudson, it provides for a very narrow width house. Because the petitioner, if they have, as they've shown here, a detached garage, they need to have a minimum of 4-foot setback on the non-driveway side and a 8-foot setback on the driveway side. If we take off 4 feet and 8 feet from a 32-foot wide lot, they're having difficulty marketing, as they've presented, marketing the property for development because developers want to build a home that's wider. So what they're proposing to do is to utilize that recorded easement for the purposes of a driveway that then leads to a garage in the back as the property becomes wider, as the property extends further out. So they're looking to utilize that easement for the purposes of their own personal driveway. In doing so, they want to maximize the buildable area on their particular property. They're looking to be able to build market the property as being approved to build a single-family home as close to that property line as possible. So they're here today seeking a variance for that, as well as what they've shown you in the sketch covers a greater portion of the property that's allowed by the total lot coverage. For this particular size piece of property, the maximum allowable lot coverage, so all the structures with a roof line, cannot exceed more than 1,800 square feet. And they're seeking, as you can see, based on the numbers provided in the sketch, they're seeking, based on their dark shaded gray area, to have a maximum total lot coverage of just shy of 2,000 square feet. So they're seeking a variance from the total lot coverage, again, in order to be able to have that assurance to be able to market the property for the purposes of constructing a single-family home.
Any questions for Mr. Murphy? Mr. Ofac?
So that if you didn't have that 167, it was only 1,800 square feet, then the max lot coverage would be 30%?
One more time?
So if that 167 wasn't there for what they are over 1,800 square feet, would the max lot coverage then be at 30% instead of 35? Because on the zoning analysis page, it said max lot coverage right now is 35% and proposed, or sorry, I missed reading it. I got it now.
Answered your own question?
Yes.
Got it? Okay, good. Perfect. Those are the best questions.
Anybody else?
So I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Joseph, when you said they can put up a fence, are you saying that with an easement, you can put a fence up all along the outside of the easement?
The petitioner can speak to that, but you'll see they provided you documentation of the recorded easement, and it lists all the exact things that are allowable. Landscaping, fencing, driveways, things of that nature. But essentially be elements associated with constructing a single-family home on this lot.
Ms. Ukin?
So the 4-foot waiver of the setback is because the building would come up to the easement line?
Come up to the property line, which abuts the adjacent property, which starts the easement.
The easement, okay.
Correct, and they're aware that they may very well have, if they have windows openings, you're only allowed a certain percentage as you get close to a property line, even with a single-family home. So they're looking to have an outline of a building, but they fully understand that if they're at the property line, that they have limitations under the building code, as they learn with the multifamily building. So they've given you a sketch. They can describe a little bit more logic behind what they presented, but that, you are correct. The sketch does illustrate their proposed single-family home at the lot line. They need to step it back. I think it's 3 feet for a certain number of openings. They can speak to that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Murphy? All right, not seeing any. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. This reminds me of the long and winding road that leads me back to be here before the zoning board 4 years later. So Dennis Cowan, Plunkett Cooney, 38505 Woodward, and with me is Ron Peludat, who is actually a petitioner. I don't know how I got listed as a petitioner. I guess maybe I signed something, but when we came in to file. Ron is a lifelong resident of Royal Oak until last year when, unfortunately, due to his wife's health situation, they had to sell their home. They lived in this home at 519, which borders the vacant lot for 44 years. And Ron had been the caretaker and owner of the apartment building, which we came to you for 4 years ago. So I'm going to try and reduce a 3-beer story to a shot glass because Joe's covered a lot of the ground, but just especially for the folks who weren't here 4 years ago. So 4 years ago, when they went to sell the apartment building, the apartment property owner or new owner did not want the vacant lot. They didn't need it. They didn't want to take care of it. They didn't want the liability for it. So we said, okay, we'll go get a lot split. So we went and got the lot split, and it was only possible, and we thank you again today because you had to approve a record 9 variances. And they were all laid out, and we very much appreciate Mr. Peludat and Mrs. Peludat that variance granting because they were able to sell the apartment building. And then we thought we were all set up for the lot split or sale of the residential lot at a later date. What we didn't know is when the lot split paperwork went through all the city departments, it has to go, I think, through 4 departments. When it got to the building department said, we have to have this 17-foot area that you can't build, this 17 by 64-foot area. And we offered 4 or 5 alternatives. But the alternative they wanted and would not budge on, and we're not upset about it, it's worked out, it's fine, was that they wanted the property to be sold as part of the apartment building. The apartment building owner didn't really want it, so he said, I'm going to give you a perpetual easement. You can basically have the property. You can do with it whatever the city will allow, and you can maintain it, because they didn't really ever want it. So that's how we got to the easement, and the easement was very specific, working with the building department, and I want to tell you, the building department agreed to the easement because they had to give us the okay so we could sell the property with the hope of ever having the lot sold as a residential lot into the future, and that was the arrangement we had. We had extensive negotiations and discussions, and that's what the agreement everybody came to between the Peludats, the new apartment property owner, and the city. However, the issue has always been being able to provide a buildable lot for future use, because as I pointed out and brought with me, or in the letter, 58 residents signed a petition several years ago. They had no problem as long as it would end up, the vacant lot would be a buildable residential lot. And most recently, Mr. Peludat, before the snow came down, went out and got 18 more signatures of his neighbors. So I think there's broad-based support for this to be a single-family residential lot. Here's the bottom line. If you approve these two very minor variances, we already have what in essence is a 17-foot setback from the original property line, which is now that easement area that you pointed out. An additional 4 feet is a little bit of overkill. It may well be that we may not be able to use all that, a builder, because if they want to have openings, there's some issues. We've already talked to the building department about it, but this will give a little bit of flexibility. The lot coverage is very minimal. I think it's at 7 or 8% request. But for the fact that we had to give up the 17 by 64 square feet area, we wouldn't even be here before you on that, because that would take us over the 6,000 square foot minimum. And this lot coverage issue would not come into play. But we had to give up that property because of the building department requirement and the negotiations that we had in terms of actual ownership. So here's the bottom line. If you approve these two variances, and a structure is built along the lines, a single-family residential home, nobody will ever see the difference. There will be a driveway like most homes have. There will be a detached garage in the back. There will be a home. It will observe the front yard setback, and it won't look any different than any of the other houses in the area. It's just a very unique situation, and I have to say, in 36 years of doing real estate, having been on the planning commission, a couple other jobs I had here on both sides of the fence, so to speak, I've never seen anything like this, so this is probably the most unique circumstance. We do have our Scott LaFond, who is our broker here. We have tried to market the property, and several builders have expressed an interest, but every time they go down to the building department, there's all this confusion about what can be built and what can't be built. So what we identified in working with Juliana and Joe and the building department is if we can get these two issues resolved, that should resolve the issues going forward. So in essence, we're asking you to finalize the parameters so that we can have this sold. We could have come here and asked for much greater variances, but Mr. Peludat feels he wants to see a house built in the future that would be consistent with the neighborhood. We did give you a footprint. Keep in mind that footprint doesn't include a front porch or a back porch or any overhangs. We think that that's going to reduce the actual square footage. What we did do in putting that together is we were looking at a house 3 doors down at 505, which is a new build, and that is just under 2,400 square feet. So what you'll end up having is we have the large apartment building in terms of scale. Estimate that this house maximum could be built about 2,400 square feet. And then the house that they sold is at 519. I had it in front of me. I pulled it out. Is about 1,900, 18 to 1,900 square feet. So in terms of scale, because that apartment building is pretty big, it will look right. It will look correct in terms of fitting into the neighborhood. It won't be the biggest house in the neighborhood. It won't be the smallest house in the neighborhood. So as you know, that's a neighborhood with a lot of character, and Mr. Peludat would never want anything to be, this is not a McMansion that could be built on this site. But when you look at it from the street, it will look like it just fits in like everything else. Nobody will know about the 17 by 64 square foot easement except 3 property owners and the 9 of you and the staff. So that's our situation. We would ask your indulgence this evening to grant these two. I think I would put modest variances to be able to have us sell the lot, for it to be used for single-family residential, which what was promised to the neighbors and what they expect. Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Cowan at this point? This is pretty cut and dry.
Thank you.
All right. With that being said, I will go ahead and open up the public hearing. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board on this issue?
Hello, I'm Kimberly Mayo. I live at 519 West Hudson, the property next to the vacant lot. I have a question about the side yard setbacks. I know that it's just a rendering of what potentially could be on the lot, but printing out the code from the website, it's supposed to be 5 feet side yard setback, according to, you know, what's documented. I don't know if that makes a difference in that rendering at all, just side note. And then the setback from the front property line, it says it should not exceed 50 feet from the front, and that's at 64. So how does that factor into?
All right, well, first, stay on microphone if you want so that people at home can hear you.
Sure.
Do you want to?
We'll wait till she's done with her.
Okay, all right. Did you have any other questions?
Yeah,
Mr. Murphy is taking notes, so he'll answer those questions for you.
Okay. Let's see. The 505 property that they were referencing is on like a double lot. It's not the same lot size as what we're dealing with. And then I have just a general question. If this isn't approved, what is the hardship suffered by the petitioner? Is that like the goal, to prove a hardship if this doesn't get approved? Like if it doesn't get approved, what?
Well, as we move forward, we will discuss hardships.
Okay,
Anything else?
that's it.
All right, thank you so much. All right, anybody else want to address the board on this matter? All right, not seeing anybody, I will go ahead and bring it back to this side of the table. Did you want to speak about the setbacks at all, or?
If the board would like.
Yeah, please.
Okay. The property, it measures at the minimum front yard setback, and the minimum front yard setback for this property is the equivalent to the existing house, existing home adjacent at 519. That house, based on that survey, has a front yard setback of 31 feet. So this house is required to have a minimum of a 31-foot front yard setback. They can have a maximum of a 50-foot setback. It can be anything in that range. They've noted on their sketch that they're placing it at that minimum at 30 feet. And the property at that minimum width, if we measure it side lot line to side lot line, property's only 32 feet wide. Any property under 45 feet in width that has a detached garage can have the non-driveway side can have a minimum of a 4-foot setback. For lots 45 feet or larger, the minimum side yard setback is 5 feet.
All right, excellent, thank you.
Now, before we start, you want to ask them if they want to move forward based on one absence?
Oh, yeah, yeah, I forgot he wasn't here, so. Anyway, Mr. Cowan, you can see that we are short a member this evening.
Mr. Peludat would like to move forward this evening.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are back on this side of the table. I saw Mr. Kroll and Mr. Klatt.
I will make a motion to approve both variances.
I'll support that.
Mr. Kroll?
Not having been here 4 years ago when this was originally decided, it would certainly appear to me, through my zoning board experience, that the intent was to split these lots. Sounds like a lot of things happened between then and now, but we still have a vacant lot, and it seems reasonable with the approach, so I have no problem.
Mr. Klatt?
Well, it appears, based on the number of signatures here, that there's a great deal of support at over 50-some-odd signatures. So it seems like the neighborhood is in agreement with this development. It also appears that the spirit of the ordinance has been maintained with the visual setback that is here on that setback line. So for those reasons, I feel that the home that they're proposing fits the scale of the neighborhood, and I'm in agreement with it.
Mr. Ophak?
I was here 4 years ago. I wasn't liking the lot split then, but it is what it is, and the hardships that they're dealing with now is brought about by that lot split. The 4-foot side one, I have no problem with that one due to the fact of you got the easement there. The 167, though, they have a brand-new lot. Why can't they fit within that? That I don't understand. I mean, that would still take the building footprint down to 1360, which is still larger than my footprint of my personal home, so. And you're gonna double it up 2 stories, so that's at least 2,600 there. So I don't see the need for that second variance.
What I see now.
I was going to say the same thing.
Any other comments? Mr. Gavin?
My one comment was gonna be on the hardship. This property is quite unique, I think, with the easement being right there as a result of the lot split. And it's, it just makes it really interesting to have to put something there like this. And from, I do a fair amount of real estate law. It's actually quite a novel solution. I'm actually kind of impressed with it. So that was my one comment, was to the uniqueness of the property goes to the hardship, because I know that was one discussion.
Well, I just don't see the hardship going to the size. I agree that the 4-foot setback is needed, and that's a hardship, so I have no problem with that. But the size is, they're just trying to maximize what they can get for the property. And, yeah, everybody wants to see a single-family residence there, and we're going to allow one. I just don't think it has to be that big.
Well, I'll be supporting this motion. I mean, the first variance, I think, pretty much speaks for itself. And but for this very odd easement, we wouldn't even be talking about this 167 square foot. If you were to square it up and just have the property look the way it would look, and obviously there's no yellow lines drawn on the lawn that anybody's ever gonna see. So I think, frankly, what they're proposing, given the overall lot size that's gonna be practically used, I think it's a very proportional, a proportional size for this home.
I think next to the apartment building and everything, the scale doesn't really, I think small would be not as good as a little larger there.
No, that's a good point, because that 17-foot by 64-foot dimension is not factored into that overall lot coverage. That's a great point.
So if it was factored in, they would be within the.
Yeah, they wouldn't need it.
Okay.
And when you put the drive in there, it's gonna look pretty.
All right, so then I guess I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both, gentlemen.
Thank you. And just, Mr. Gavin, I tried to figure out if I could turn this into a bar exam question for lawyers, but it would be too confusing and they'd get, never practiced real estate law. Thank you very much.
That was unanimous then?
You're up.
We'll give it a minute. Looks like we're switching quarterbacks.
Two is gone.
Oh, yeah, I will.
Joe's going to watch the hockey game.
All right.
The coach just pulled Mr. Murphy.
I think they're able to hash something out with the easement. With the
And as I just stated earlier, item D2 is no longer on our agenda, so that moves us right along to item D3, which is case number 191142, public hearing on the appeal of David Albright, petitioner owner for the following variances. A, alter and expand a non-conforming structure. B, waive 0.04 feet of the minimum required 3-foot side yard setback for an accessory structure. And C, waive 0.02 feet of the maximum allowable 13-foot accessory structure height to permit construction of an addition to an accessory structure located at 4213 Olivia Avenue. Ms. Sherhart.
Okay. The subject property is located on the west side of Olivia Avenue, north of Normandy Road. The property is approximately 8,000 square feet and is zoned one-family residential. The site is improved with a single-story, single-family home with a existing detached garage of approximately 308 square feet. The accessory structure maintains a non-conforming north side yard setback of 2.6 feet, but otherwise meets zoning standards relative to lot coverage and height. I'm going to go to the site plan now as we're talking. So earlier this year, perhaps it was last year, it came to the attention of the building division that the petitioner had begun construction of an addition to the existing accessory structure without seeking the necessary permits. Upon review, it was determined that the petitioner would need to seek variances to retain the unfinished garage addition as currently constructed, given a few considerations. The petitioner proposes a 17.2 by 17.5 foot addition to the north of the existing garage. You can see it marked here. The addition totals approximately 299 square feet, bringing total accessory structure lot coverage to 7.6 and total lot coverage to 21.6%. So lot coverage, both for the accessory structure and all structures on the lot, are not the issue. The proposed garage does maintain the non-conforming 2.6 foot side yard setback. So first, a variance is requested to alter or expand a non-conforming structure. Secondly, there is a request to waive 0.4 feet of the minimum required 3 feet side yard setback that would be necessary. And then lastly, we do have a requirement that for, the standard requirement is that a garage can be 13 feet height measured from the midpoint. The proposed garage addition measures 13.2 feet in height. Therefore, it actually would require a greater setback. And so, given the existing setback, we're taking it as waiving a variance to waive 0.2 feet of the maximum allowable accessory structure height of 13 feet, since it's not placed at what would be required, which would be 3.2 feet. Basically, we could have taken this a couple of ways. We could have just had a variance request for waiving 0.6 feet for side yard setback, but instead we took it as 0.4 feet and for the setback, and then 0.2 feet for the height. So those are, again, the three variance requests before you. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for staff at this point? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if this is for you or for the petitioner, but in the petitioner's letter, they indicate that the building is 2.6 feet taller than they're permitted, and you're saying it's 0.2. Is that because it's a different place of measuring?
I'm not sure. As far as our plans went and taking a scale to it, I thought that the height was 13.2 feet.
I believe they're measuring, it says 15'8" from grade to the peak, and I believe you're to the midpoint. So
Yes,
probably,
so
that's the
much like
problem.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Opak.
So, on the hypothetical thing that we deny them, does that mean they have to tear this down and start it again, or change the things that?
I might let the petitioner speak to that. I know there was maybe some litigation ongoing, and so they were offered the chance to seek these variances as a solution. So I can't speak to that. Huh?
Shouldn't that be somewhere in this?
Should it be? It is it?
It is in there.
It might.
I'm gonna start reading these, I guess. I thought I did read it, actually.
All right, any other questions for staff at this point? All right, is the petitioner present? How are you, sir?
Good, thank you. My name's David Albright. I'm a resident and been a homeowner in Royal Oak now for just about 20 years. I'm asking the board to grant this variance request tonight for a couple of reasons. Without it, I would say, and I don't want to use a bunch of legal mumbo jumbo, but I would say that the hardship is lack of storage, just plain and simple. It's a small house in Royal Oak, just under 1,100 square feet. And typical of a lot of the homes that were built in the late 1940s, it's a house on a slab, no basement. It's basically a two-bedroom home. So there's very little storage space. And so a couple years ago, my wife and I had talked about it, and I started tossing around ideas. I hired an architect, and so I started constructing this thing. And then about a year ago, I came home and there was a stop work notice on the building. So then I was issued a fine, and I paid that fine, and have since met with the city of Royal Oak, the building department, and the code enforcement officers, and kind of started to build up a little bit of a relationship with them, and there were some issues, and I resolved most of those issues. Then it comes down to the height issue and the side setbacks and the rear setback. So therefore, I applied for these variances. And to answer your question about this, what would I do? Well, sure, I'd have to probably get a chainsaw and probably cut the top of it down some. If I'm not issued these variances requested, additional hardships would be that a lot of time and a lot of money spent on this project would go down the drain. And I did all this myself on the weekends and nights, and I own a painting company, so I'm not a builder or something like that. And I want to apologize to the board too, because sure, I unbeknownst to me, I built this structure. I didn't realize that I needed these permits. I thought because I'm going to build this off the back of the garage, but then I come to find out that's not the case. Like I said, I was issued fines. I paid those fines, had met with the city. And I really would just like this variance request granted, so I can go ahead and I can finish the project, get all the necessary permits and finish the project. I've spoken to all the neighbors. I have the support of the neighbors. I don't have any written letters in support of it, but I've talked to my neighbors on all sides. Kathy, my neighbor next door, who's lived there for about 40 years, keeps asking me when I'm going to finish it. It looks nice, et cetera. I have some large photos of what it currently looks like. The addition, the architecture and the styles in congruence with the rest of the house. It's not outlandish. It's not some big square box. It's made out of all the finest materials. When it's done, the exterior will be stone and stucco, stone shipped in from a quarry out of Montana, so it matches the rest of the house. And I did it because I had ordered these, and there lies an issue I kind of screwed up, was I ordered the, referred to as attic trusses from Michigan Truss and Timber, and they were configured wrong. So there lies, the unit was actually built higher than it should have been. But I'm not trying to point any blame on anybody other than myself. And so what I'm saying is it's not going to be some ugly looking structure. It doesn't disperse or cast any shadow on my neighbor's yard. Kathy, to the right of me, it's far enough from the left neighbor that doesn't provide any type of shadowing or anything of that nature that I'm aware of. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, the hardship lies in the fact that it's very difficult to live in a home when you only have like a couple of closets, 3 foot by 3 foot closets, especially when there's no basement. So this basically was my solution, practical solution to having a basement, because I have, with these storage trusses, I have upstairs, like a 17 by 17 foot section, not even, when you can figure it, where you can put a lot of boxes, you can put outdoor furniture, things of that nature, which most residents would put in their basement. So.
Any questions from the petitioner? Yes, sir.
You said you hired an architect for this. When did you hire the architect? When did this whole drawing setup go? How did you start constructing before you even knew about the permit?
I hired an architect that lives out of state. Michael, he used to live in Michigan. Michael Hyman. I hired him a couple of years ago. He did some preliminary or rough drawings. His initial ones were just not something I could do as a homeowner. And then really, I had a guy doing a little bit of cement work at my house a few years back. I asked him if he could possibly pour a slab behind the garage. He said he could. I had about a week. I dug all the footings. Beyond 42 inches, I actually have photos, which the WROK building department has. They poured it. then I sat on that for a couple of years. And then about 2 years ago, one Friday night, I decided that that weekend I was gonna start laying block. And I was gonna start this, and I did. And then it took a matter of, you know, a couple of years, a little bit of work here, a little there, because like I said, I did all the work and I paid for everything.
So, you being within some sort of construction business, doing painting, dealing with construction people, dealing with the architect, not one person ever has brought up permitting process or just knowing about that?
No.
Okay.
I was kind of wondering the same thing. I didn't know there was anybody left that thought they could build a garage without a permit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where I come from, that's called go for forgiveness instead of permission.
Yeah.
Any other?
And while we're at it, I don't think that storage is one of the criteria of hardships that we deal with.
Especially since it could have been a couple inches just adjusted on the whole thing and you still could have had your storage.
Any other questions for the petitioner at this point? All right, so I'm going to ask you to take a seat real quickly, just in case anybody wants to address us on this. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board on this issue? All right, not seeing anybody, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. Oh, and sir, we are, as you well know, we're down one member. Would you like us to move forward with our vote, or we can postpone it till next month in hopes of having a full board? You got it, sir, absolutely. All right, so I'll bring it back to this side of the table. Mr. Klatt?
Well, I guess shame on the applicant for not filing for permits. You understand that now. But, I mean, these are pretty modest requests here. I mean, looking at this existing garage, another hardship is that you really couldn't expand to the south because you can't really access it. It would be behind the house. So I understand why you went deeper into the lot. So again, it's a pretty modest request. You hugged that'd be the north lot line, so you just expanded that non-conforming, so I understand that. And you're a little bit over on the height, but it's not to an extreme. So I'll be in support of these.
You want to make a motion?
Was that a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve both variances,
All three?
all three.
Mr. Gavin?
I don't know if I missed it. Did we open this up for public hearing?
We did.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did, I just might have been looking at something here. I'll support.
Any follow-up comments, either one of you gentlemen?
No, the height issue is it would be an issue for me if it were a much greater height problem. You know, I look at I agree with Mr. Klatt, petitioner should have understood the permitting process. But I look at the variance to alter and expand a non-conforming structure and waiving the side yard setback. I think those would have been normally, if this had been, followed the proper procedure, I think this board would have considered those pretty handily. But with the minor height issue, it's pretty minimal. And I understand the hardship issue not being a storage issue, but here it doesn't. I feel like I feel like he's met the requirements.
Mr. Kroll?
I'm in agreement with Robert on a lot of things, because I think we're really asking very little here as far as variances go. I would hope everybody here watching and everybody watching in TV land understands when people start building things before they come to us, it's a real disadvantage to us. You kind of caught me in a good mood today, so I'm going to vote anyway not to make you rip it down. But if I wasn't in a good mood, I might go the opposite way. And I've seen boards make people tear up concrete, so it's not something automatic. I'd go for permits instead of permission.
Anderson.
I agree with Mr. Cole on that, because I believe we have had denied somebody some variances after the fact, and they did have to remove the project that they were doing. In this case, I went around to the other side of the block. The height, I could see the terrain kind of goes down. The house directly behind him is a little bit on a higher elevation, so that extra height isn't really that detrimental to anyone. So in that case, with a good scolding, I guess I'll.
I do think your house is just adorable, though. I mean, the fit and finish and everything about it is really splendid.
Mr. Opak?
Although you guys think it's, people will watch and learn, or they seem to sometimes watch and learn the other thing, which is come for forgiveness, because how many fences come before us that get built, even though we tell them not
Seems like we
to.
made somebody tear one of those down.
Yeah,
not that
yeah.
long ago.
Finish.
Honestly, if they would have came to us before this, I probably would have gone for all of them except for maybe C, but just on the principle alone, I can't, in good faith, grant this just because of asking for forgiveness.
He's not in a good mood.
Anybody else?
You know how the moods are running here.
Right. Then I'm going to go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to approve the 3 variances signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Yay.
All right. You're all set, sir. Motion passes. Okay, moving right along to our next item of new business, which is case number 191143, public hearing on the appeal of Outfront Media petitioner and Connecticut Storage Fund owner for the following variances. A, waive 66.25 feet of the minimum required 75-foot setback from a public right-of-way, and B, waive 78 square feet of the maximum permitted surface display area of 300 square feet to permit erection of a billboard on a property zoned general industrial located at 5060 Coolidge Highway. Mr. Murphy.
Subject property is located on Coolidge, just north of 14 Mile Road. It's in the industrial zoning district, and it's improved with the permanent use is, the use is a storage facility. This site did contain a previously approved digital billboard via an agreement between, a settlement agreement between the city of Royal Oak and the petitioner. That billboard was erected and utilized. It was removed a year ago in order to expand the storage facility. Petitioner is proposing to construct a new digital billboard on the property, and they're seeking a variance because of the distance requirement from a public right-of-way. We have a minimum distance requirement for billboards of 75 feet, and they are proposing to locate it 8.75 feet from the property line. Additionally, we have a requirement that the area, the square footage of the billboard itself be no more than 300 square feet, and they're proposing to make that 78 square feet bigger than the maximum allowable. You'll see a table in the report, and I will more importantly remind the board of the attorney-client privilege correspondence that you recently received from the city attorney.
All right, any questions for Mr. Murphy at this point? All right, not seeing any, is the petitioner present? Good evening.
Good evening, Adam Barrett from Bodman PLC. I'm here on behalf of Outfront Media. I just wanted to touch briefly on what the request is about. Outfront, which was previously known as CBS Outdoor, had a lawsuit with the city, and the lawsuit resolved not by a settlement agreement, but by a consent judgment entered by a federal court judge. That consent judgment provided that the city could help choose the location for the billboard and take advantage of the billboard and use it for approximately 10 weeks of free advertising a year. For the last approximately 6 years or so, the city has enjoyed that billboard and has used it for public promotion of civic messages, as well as in this business corridor. Most billboard advertising is approximately 80 to 90% local. It's been something that we've been able to use for local businesses in the area. This billboard, ultimately, what we are seeking to do is put the billboard back. The exact billboard face is still sitting in Outfront's warehouse. We're not looking to change the size of the billboard that was from previously there. In fact, we're seeking the same setback as this board previously has allowed for the storage company to put its facility, and as I'm advised, has recently allowed a cell phone tower in the area, the same setback variance. We believe that the dimensional requirement standard for a dimensional variance is met. Ultimately, this is not a plight caused by us. We want to honor our agreement with the city. I believe the city enjoyed its agreement with Outfront. This is something that is unique to the property itself. There are no other locations on this property. We are entitled by right to have this use. Moreover, we're entitled by our consent judgment to have this billboard here. So we would ask that the city permit us to put the billboard back where it was and for all parties to enjoy the use that it provided.
Any questions for the petitioner at this point?
My understanding is you're looking to move the sign, not put it back where it was, right? There's buildings where it was.
Correct. What I'm saying is put it back on the property where it was. Because of, because of the construction of the expansion of the storage facility, we can't obviously go right there. We want to go basically parallel to it. And it's approximately the same setback as was allowed for the company. But we're not seeking to change the deal. We're not looking to make the billboard higher, fatter, taller, anything like that. We want to honor what we had previously agreed to with the city. And to avoid, I mean, the natural declination of that request is to avoid further legal proceedings. I'd like to avoid that as well. I think we reached a good agreement with the city. I think all have benefited, and we'd like to see that continuing.
Yes, ma'am.
Did the consent agreement permit you to take it down and rebuild it? Or did it specifically prohibit rebuilding it?
No, the consent agreement was for us to have the right to erect it.
And it had nothing in it about
This is
whether
not a
you could-
contingency that anyone planned or had anticipated.
All right, any other questions? All right, let me open up the public hearing real quickly, see if anybody in the audience wants to address us on this. Is there anybody that would like to address the board on this matter? All right, not seeing anybody, I will close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table. Oh, yes, and so we are, again, down one board member. Would you like us to proceed, or would you like to hold off till next month?
We'd like to proceed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kroll.
I would like to make a motion, case number 161143. I move to deny both requests. It's both the setback and the surface area variances.
We have a motion.
I'll support.
We have a second. Would you like to offer any supporting evidence?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know why we're hearing this based on what I'm viewing. There was an agreement that will, and my understanding is that it reads, and I quote, CBS Outdoor will not apply nor seek to erect any other billboard within the municipal boundaries of the city of Royal Oak unless the defendant, which is Royal Oak, modifies section 770-57 of its code of ordinances to expand the locations where billboards may be erected or to reduce the spacing requirements to allow additional billboard construction within the municipal boundaries of the city of Royal Oak. And the city of Royal Oak has not changed anything according to that. So I think, I don't know why we even had to hear this at all based on that. But even if that, we throw that out and say that's okay, I'm having a real hardship getting hardships here tonight. First, there's nothing unusual about the property. It can be used for what it's proposed to be used because it was a storage area and it's still a storage area. So we really, I'm kind of waiting to hear the hardships of why we would allow this.
Can I address that?
Sure.
Not at this point. I'd rather have the board have a conversation.
Okay, let us stay on this side of the table for now, sir. All right, is there any more information that you want from the motion? All right, so is there any discussion on the motion?
I believe Mr. Kroll summarized it well.
Agree.
I would just add that the hardship, if there was one, was created by the property owner because they expanded their building and went outside the bounds of their consent agreement.
Yeah, really, we had nothing to do with the decision to expand, right? So we had no say in that. But that business owner decided to expand, the sign went down, and I'm not in agreement at this point that that sign deserves to go back up in a different spot based on the legalese that I'm reading.
All right, well, with that being said, then I guess I will go ahead and call for the motion. All those in favor of the
Can I address the point? Come back to the.
Motion's on the table.
Yeah, we have a motion on the table, so I think we'll just move forward with that, sir. All right, so all those in favor of the motion to deny signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that motion does carry to deny. Thank you, sir. back here.
Oh, there we go.
So where are we at? All right, item D5, case number 191144, public hearing on the appeal of Chester Stempian petitioner and Yupin Saparia, owner for the following variances. A, waive 2 of the minimum required 7 off-street parking spaces, and B, waive 7 foot 4 inches of the minimum required 20-foot maneuvering aisle width to permit construction of a second-story addition to a commercial building to house 1 residential dwelling unit located at 915 South Washington. Am I giving this back to Mrs. Sherhart?
Yes.
All right, you're up.
Okay, so this property is located south of the downtown in the mixed-use 2 zone district on South Washington Avenue. At its October 8th, 2019 meeting, the Planning Commission granted site plan approval to allow the petitioner to construct a second-story addition to the commercial property to house 1 residential dwelling unit. The approval was contingent upon the petitioner obtaining necessary variances from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So the variances before you relate to the parking, and I'm going to go here. So based upon the proposed uses, the residential dwelling unit requires 2 parking spaces, and the commercial space, which still doesn't have a tenant attached, as I understand it, could be up to the intensity of, retail sales or perhaps a carry-out restaurant. So that parking requirement is 1 space per 200 square feet. At 955 square feet of usable floor area, the commercial space needs 5 parking spaces. So taken together, the parking need is 7 spaces. On the site currently are 5 spaces. So the first variance request before you is a request to waive 2 of the required 7 parking spaces. The next variance request before you relates to the orientation of the parking and the width of the maneuvering aisle. So as you can see, the parking spaces are angled at 90 degrees. Zoning requires that with angled parking at 90 degrees, there's actually a 2-way drive aisle, and the minimum width for that drive aisle is 20 feet. However, there is only 12 feet and 8 inches, that's the width of the existing drive aisle. So the property is located between Washington and it does abut a public alley to the east. So the petitioner proposes to use the existing driveway as a 1-way, and then cars would then exit through the public alley. One of the contingencies of approval from the Planning Commission was to add signage to that effect, displaying that it would be 1-way. But still before you is the requirement that for 90-degree parking, the driveway be 20 feet. So the second variance request is to waive, what's the math here? 7 feet 4 inches of the minimum required 20-foot maneuvering aisle width. Do you have questions for me?
Any questions for staff at this point? Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Anthony.
No, I wasn't looking. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. So if they were to reorient the parking spaces to anything other than 75 and 90, they would comply because the driveway would be the right width, correct?
Well, I think to angle the parking differently would reduce the number of
That's what I'm
parking
getting at. That's
spaces,
what I'm
so
getting
it
at.
would, so yes, exactly. They're kind of trying to maximize the number of spaces for the space that they have, and I guess,
So it's a trade-off.
exactly. So yeah, if the parking were angled differently, they would need to seek a greater parking variance in terms of number of spaces.
But they do have 20 feet behind those 90-degree spaces.
Yes,
So the
in
car
the
can get out.
In the public
make the
alley,
turn.
correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Ofac.
The angled spots that are along the north side, that belongs to the building that's to the north, correct?
Yes, that is a separate parcel.
Just wanted to verify that that was the case.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So the 20-foot width is required regardless of whether or not it's 1-way?
So the way it works is, here, let me go back up to the, diagram. So when parking is at 75 to 90 degrees, we don't have, we basically then it triggers needing a two-way drive aisle for that because it's such that cars could maneuver as easily in or out. The way they're angled doesn't sort of direct them to flow in one way. So have I answered your question? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. All right, not seeing any other questions, is the petitioner present?
I'm Chester Stempian, architect for the project. Basically, we're asking for a variance to two pre-existing conditions. There is a one-way driveway that was used for dry cleaners, and that's why that building was allowed to operate the way it was. And basically, there's a 3-foot bump out in that 12-foot driveway. So in essence, it's like 9 foot plus. What I propose that we take that bump out to allow a clear 12-foot driveway to the rear. And it's not that we're dead-ending the parking lot because there's an alley to the east that would allow cars to get out or in from the alley. The other situation is the parking lot. Right now, there is a garage attached to the building that is lightly outlined. That would allow a maximum of 3 cars, and with today's requirements, you'd only be able to get 2 if you had a handicap parking stall there. What we propose is to get rid of that garage, which will allow us to get 5 cars in. And in noticing that area at the south end of the town, there seems to be ample parking along Washington. If someone was going to a business there or a restaurant, they wouldn't be there 8 hours a day out on the street. And so we feel that the 5 cars would be plenty would be enough for what we're proposing. We suggest, well, we're trying to get a 1-unit apartment building on the 2nd level that could require 2 cars, but most likely an apartment dweller would be working somewhere, and so in essence, we're not eating up the space all day long. So again, we're asking for a variance to 2 pre-existing conditions.
Any questions for the petitioner at this point? All right, not seeing any. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to take a seat real quick. Just stay by the front row if you would, sir. And is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board on this matter? Yes, sir.
Gerald Rice, 824 South Washington, almost directly across from his building. I drove by it, and I can't see the parking in the back. I could see 4 at the max. And as he was stating, was the alley, yes, it runs into the dentist office right next door. That's not a problem, but the problem is the apartment that they want to put on the top is the parking. We have no extra parking around there. I've lived there for 50 years, so I do have a knowledge of it. I live at the corner of 9th and Washington. We have the people coming off of Woodward Avenue using 9th Street as a cut-through, which I think you've even mentioned once. And they also use Hudson as a cut-through. So those streets are really packed tight with extra parking. And where are these two, the apartment dwellers? I own rental property in Royal Oak. I know how apartment dwellers do from 40 years of experience. And where are they going to park? You can't park out on the street. It's only good for 1 hour. So the only place you can go is the side streets. And OCC is very protective of their parking. They will pull in there sometime and you'll find out. It's just that if you could come up with the parking somewhere, I wouldn't have a problem, but we have enough on 9th Street, we have enough on Hudson's, and 910 Washington, where the two buildings were combined together, they don't even have enough parking. Their employees are parking out on Washington. About 4 or 5 cars sit daily on Washington Avenue. So that is my concern about doing this. If you can come up with parking, great, you know, but if you, I just don't see it. Thank you.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question?
Sure.
Do they have a parking problem now? I go by that building a lot, I seldomly ever see any cars there.
What, behind 824?
Yeah, the laundry?
The laundry, well, there's nothing in the first floor. There's nobody, it's not being.
Oh, it's not being used?
No, it's not being used. And if you go back there, you'll see it is a very small area
Yeah.
to try to put some cars. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, is there anybody else? All right, not seeing anybody. I will close the public hearing and bring it back to this side of the table. And again, sir, we are down one member. Would you like us to move forward to the vote? Thank you, sir. Mr. Ofac,
I'll make a motion to approve the variances as requested.
we have a motion.
I'll support.
We have a second, Mr. Klein or Mr. Gavin. Mr. Ofac, floor is yours.
Currently, it is a one-way driveway, and because he's adding on to an apartment, he's just trying to ask for it again, so I don't have a problem with that. The spots that have been calculated on a wide-open, empty building with probably a little bit of fluff in there for mechanical stuff. Not knowing what it's gonna be, they may not even need 5 spaces. If it's a certain type of business, it might only need 2. We don't know that right now, so I can understand why he's asking for the max he would require, the worst-case scenario. I think as long as he gives the partner person one permanent spot, he's probably all right there. But this being so close to the downtown, that there is sort of metered parking right nearby. I actually used to rent at 315 on 9th Street, and yeah, we used to park on the street because we didn't have enough parking in the back for it. So that's why all the renters on that street park on that street. So I can understand the gentleman's concern about that street being filled up, but someone coming in here for retail or commercial use, they're gonna park nearby the closest meter spot that they can get to. I see. So I don't have a problem with what he's requesting.
Any follow-up comments?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it comes down to a trade-off. You angle the spaces, maybe we comply then with the lane, but then we lose a few parking spaces. So I think this is the best way to maximize it. They also did a good job by removing that garage piece, so we gained more spaces. So this is the most efficient way, and I trust their drawing is correct. They're showing 5 spaces, so I trust the drawing is correct. So I think it's the best way to maximize the parking here. So I'll be in support.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a problem with the extra 2 spaces they want us to waive. I think that there's so much that hasn't been completed downtown. We don't even know what's gonna happen. And even though this isn't right downtown, I am reluctant to give away 2 parking spots, not knowing what I'm really giving away. I just don't feel in this case I have enough information of what's gonna go in down there. There's a lot of things developing around it, and I'd love the idea of that you're going for. I just have a little concern about those 2 spaces, and I don't know if I can approve that.
Mr. Kroll, then Mr. Gavin?
I think we've shown throughout town in many different developments where we're doing kind of a day-night scenario with the parking, where people get up, go to work, and the businesses are open, they come home, the businesses are closed, and they've got the spaces. So I think with one apartment, I think this would work out just fine.
Mr. Gavin?
I agree on the parking and with Mr. Kroll, Mr. Ofac, and Mr. Klatt. But the on the maneuvering aisle width, I don't see how you could possibly, like, I think there's a real hardship there for sure. It's the lot's only, what, 40-foot width? It just, there's literally nothing else you can do about that. So I'm definitely in support of these.
All right, not seeing any other comments, I will go ahead and call for the motion to approve the variances. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Motion passes. You're all set, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along. Item D6, case number 191145, public hearing on the appeal of Brian and Sarah Szymanski, petitioner owner for the following variances. A, alter expanding non-conforming structure. B, waive 1.5 feet of the minimum required 5-foot south side yard setback. C, waive 3.2 feet of the minimum required 44.8-foot front yard setback. And D, waive 4.4 foot of the minimum required front yard setback measured to an unenclosed front porch and steps to permit construction of an addition to an existing non-conforming single-family dwelling located at 2039 North Vermont.
Okay.
Back to Ms. Sherhart.
So this property is located on North Vermont, north of 12 Mile, abuts the golf course. The existing dwelling maintains a non-conforming, I'm gonna actually go to the site plan, a non-conforming front yard setback. And additionally, a non-conforming south yard setback. So based on how this area was platted originally, Houstonia was going to continue, and that didn't happen, so they actually have, I think, 30.5 feet of the vacated right-of-way that is at the north of their property, and that's kind of pushed the existing home into the southeast corner. So the applicant proposes to demolish the existing detached garage and a portion of this sunroom here, and to remodel the first floor and add a second story. They are requesting to maintain the non-conforming south side yard setback as they build up. So that's the first variance request, is to well, I guess first is to alter or expand a non-conforming structure, and then secondly, to waive 1.5 feet of the minimum required 5 feet south side yard setback. And as regards the front yard setback, so the minimum required front yard setback is the average of the two adjacent properties. So you can see here, they're at 46 feet and 43.6, and so the minimum required front yard setback is 44.8 feet. The house maintains a non-conforming front yard setback at 41.6 feet. So on the second story, as you can see here, they're proposing something that is stepped back from the first floor front yard setback, but it is still non-conforming, given what the minimum required front yard setback is. So the variance for the front yard setback is to waive 3.2 feet of the minimum required 44.8 feet. And the last variance request deals with the front porch. So the zoning requirements allow a front porch and steps to extend 7 feet into the required front yard setback. For this property, given the required front yard setback of 44.8 feet, the steps could extend out to 37.8 feet. What they're proposing is 33.4 feet. And so the variance requested is the difference of that, which is 4.4 feet. I did include the calculations, as there were just a lot of numbers being thrown around, and I thought that could be helpful for our discussion. So yeah, do you have questions?
This is great, by the way. Your graph is super.
Oh,
Yeah, the
thanks.
calculations, that's a great addition.
Okay, great. We do that internally, but if that helps our conversation, I can
think that
be sure to include it each time.
Spells things out very easily. Any
Okay.
questions for staff at this point? Yes, sir.
Is the existing porch, it looks like there's an existing porch, is that
Right.
already at the same, so would the variance just be,
So
for the porch be the same as what's currently there?
So the existing porch is just a stoop, and
Okay.
so it doesn't count,
Oh,
I
okay.
think, or, no, that's wrong.
Because it looks like from this drawing that it's 4.8 feet in front of the house, so that
The
would
chart
be,
says it's 35.8
So I think it's
Existing and
non-con,
proposed will be 33.4.
Okay.
so there we go. So it is non-conforming as well, and this would just be a bit more.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, are the petitioners present? Please come forward.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
First of all, just want to thank you for including us in the November meeting. We had gotten the information and a little past the deadline, so thank you very much. My name is Brian Szymanski. This is my wife, Sarah Szymanski, and this is John Jacoupy, the architect of the building, of the drawings you've seen. We're very excited to move into the neighborhood, very excited to put the proposed drawings and the renovations into the framework of the neighborhood. And we feel with these variances presented, the house would very much fit in with the new construction that has existed north on Vermont and south on Vermont from our building. As mentioned on the variance side, essentially the south portion of the house kind of is squeezed into that the southeast corner, if you will, and asking for the 1.5 feet to kind of just build the structure straight up following the south wall. And then for the front porch, really where the idea behind that is with Vermont and as noted with Houstonia, that may have been planned to go through. The west side of the street is a pretty fantastic street for the kids for our kids just to kind of ride up and down and enjoy the neighborhood as it exists today. So the front porch would allow us to enjoy that house and the front yard to its maximum potential. Yeah, I'll defer. Yeah, any questions you have for us, or I'll let John speak as well in terms of any of the variances.
You did great. I brought props. I don't know if it's going to help or not, but I wanted to demonstrate graphically what we're trying to do here.
I get you.
So, regarding the variance for refurbishing a nonconformity, we're just basically proposing to
Can I ask you to go on microphone, sir? Thank you.
regarding the refurbishing a nonconforming structure or front setback, we're just asking to kind of rework the front elevation of the house, move the front entry, add larger windows, more in continuity with what everybody's building in the neighborhood versus like the small windows in a ranch-style home. The second item is the side yard setback, a 1.5-foot variance. In actuality, it would be a little bit less than that because that 1.5 is measured to the back of the sunroom, which is the most western part of the structure. So we're going to delete most of the sunroom and add a small addition, probably taking up half of the existing sunroom. So that 1.5 technically could be 1.4 if we're splitting hairs here. Whenever you put a second-story addition on a first-story, on a single-story home, it's always a dilemma in a situation like this, whether you want to just carry the wall up or you want to step it back. As an architect or designer, we try to come up with the most practical solution for the homeowner and maximize the square footage and reduce the cost. So that's one of the reasons why we're asking for that request. It just seems natural to just carry the wall up, and we do that. And frankly, the neighbor to the south, their structure is about 18.1 feet from the property line. So the issue of the two structures like crowding each other, technically it's not an issue if the property line becomes invisible, as we say. The front setback, it's really a product of the non-conforming structure itself. I mean, the front of the house is non-conforming as it is. I guess we could have come in and asked for a larger variance to put the second floor wall directly above the front wall, but we're trying to be a little bit more conscious of the area and just set it back a little bit. And connecting that with the request for the porch, actually the porch roof would kind of like help to hide the fact that the second story is stepped back. So that is kind of, those two items are actually kind of married together. So that's pretty much our proposal. We're just trying to make the best of a bad situation, with a house that has two non-conforming setbacks.
Any questions? Mr. Ofac?
First off, I want to applaud you for your prop, and so I give you mad props for your prop, and for actually drawing and hand drawing it. And I appreciate the fact of what you did with the second story of actually decreasing the variance that was previously going there. The only question I had was did you look at anything on how to equal or decrease that front porch for the setback? Because you're increasing that one. Everything else, you're either keeping the same or decreasing.
Well, the depth of the front porch right now is designed at 6 feet, and there is a 12-inch or a 1-foot step stepping onto the ground. So from a practical standpoint, we're trying to create a porch where they could someday put a bench out there or some, down the road, rocking chairs. Like I've designed homes where I've, done a porch that's like 3 or 4 foot deep, and they're really not practical for sitting out there. And that's the kind of neighborhood where you would probably want to sit out there and enjoy the street and let your kids play out there. So being a covered porch, if it's a little bit deeper, technically it's not a hardship, but it's a desired design aesthetic in the neighborhood that we're trying to design this house.
Well, just one quick off-the-head example. Instead of it coming straight down to the sidewalk, you maybe could have gone right to the driveway and walked that way, but to save you a foot. But I was just wondering if there's...
The existing sidewalk is from the 5-foot public sidewalk, and it goes straight up to the house, and it seems that most of the houses are like that. And I apologize, I kind of missed it. I should have probably ran the sidewalk. I mean, the step off the porch.
I just
I
want
coulda
to
did
know
that
if you
too.
thought through that, or if there were it's all right if you didn't. I just wanted to know if you did or didn't, that's all.
Any other questions for the petitioners at this point? All right, not seeing any, let me open up the public hearing real quickly if I could. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address us?
Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Basharado, and I live at 2101 North Vermont. I live the house to the north of the Szymanskis. And I'm here today to say I'm comfortable with the variances that they've requested and the design of the home that they have, and especially the piece of the 6-foot porch. We have a similar design on our porch, and that really lends well to being able to be outside watching the kids while they're playing in the front yard. So hopefully you guys will grant their request on their variances. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, and since we're now out of audience members, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And again, being a board member short, would you like us to proceed, or would you like to wait till next month?
Please proceed.
You got it, sir. Mr. Klatt.
I want to make a motion to approve. I really commend you. I think this is a case where you thoroughly understood the ordinance.
Let's get.
Support.
All right.
Oh,
Now
sorry.
continue.
I think this is a.
I'll tag team you with
Sorry for
yours.
my excitement, but I really commend you on this. I think you did a great job thoroughly understanding the ordinance and respecting it. I mean, on the south side, you're stacking above. At the front, you're making the condition a bit less. As far as the front porch goes, that's very modest, and I think we encourage front porches in Royal Oak. It adds vitality to the street. So, good design, and thank you.
Anything else?
Mr. Klatt said it best. The only thing, like I said, that could have decreased a little bit is whether or not you exit towards the driveway or straight down. I could understand, and that modest step doesn't really change the fact one way or another, so I'm fine with it.
Mr. Kroll?
I think this is a wonderful design, certainly for that street. I mean, it's one of our premier streets in Royal Oak. I would imagine that sometime 5 years from now, a lot of houses on that block are going to look like this. So I think and I agree with the front porch. I think we need more front porches in Royal Oak that you can sit on and visit with your neighbors. I'll be in support.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just had a quick, as I drove past, because I hadn't really read anything yet, and I had to stop the car and go, what do they need a variance for? Because it's like they have this great big huge lot. So it was nice to see what you actually did need it for and how it worked well. And I do appreciate a large porch that actually is a usable large porch, because there are too many skinny ones. I'll be in support of it.
And I'll be in support of this also. I mean, I think the thing that I really like most is when I looked at the fact that you're dealing with over 17,000 square feet, and I think about what could have possibly come in front of us, and we're getting this wonderful design that I think it's very proportional, it's not overbuilt, it looks great, so I'm thrilled to support this one. All right, I will call for the vote then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. You're all set. Thank you. Do we have any other business for the good of the city? Then I think all we need is this motion.
Leave.
Support.
All those in favor of the motion to adjourn signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.